To show us everything you got left.
Being a metal fan or a musician in the 2020s, you've definitely come across a deathcore band called Lorna Shore. From 2009 New Jersey, Lorna Shore released a couple of EPs before their first debut album in 2015, titled Psalms. Before then, they had a solid status of touring with other big deathcore bands such as the Black Dahlia Murder, Fit for an Autopsy, Upon a Burning Body, and much more. Now, although Lorna Shore has a total of 4 studio albums and a few EPs, we're only going to be focusing on one of these albums, and I promise it's for a good reason. In the past few years, Lorna Shore has blown up, and a very large portion of that success has been from TikTok. Their single, To the Hellfire, was released in 2021 and became a trending sound. And although we won't be getting into too much history of the band, why I bring this song up is because we need to start here in order to further analyze their most recent masterpiece of an album. The trending part of the song is towards the end, in which Will Ramos shows us what he's truly capable of. The song itself blew up, and rightfully so. It seemed like Will taking over as the main vocalist did the band a huge service as their popularity reached new heights. And here we are, taking a deep dive into Lorna Shore, specifically their album Pain Remains, as it's one of the greatest modern metal albums of all time, and that is not an exaggeration. If you don't believe me, stay tuned for this video as I'll unveil the immaculate genius of their symphonic deathcore arrangements and uncover their music theory aspects in every song off the album. So strap in, we've got a lot to learn. So this album can be placed into the symphonic deathcore subgenre, but it should be noted that it's more cinematic underneath their deathcore elements. With all the characteristics of modern dark epic sounding like scores, this album has so many unique properties that we need to talk about.
This next one is a song we've never played live before. So Merry fucking Christmas.
Let's begin with Welcome Back, Oh Sleepy Dreamer. So in the very beginning of the track, we are introduced with a percussive pulse underneath F sharp minor. We're simultaneously hearing a buildup of strings and a piano motif, basically covering the chords of F sharp minor, D minor, and C sharp. So that chord progression is the equivalent of a 1, a 6, and a 5 chord progression. Only the 6th chord is minor instead of major. You see, diatonic chords in any minor key are going to look like this. When a composer changes the chords outside of this diatonic scale, it can alter the tune immensely. Listen to how this sounds with a regular 6th chord in there. It's really not as dark and as epic. Now the main orchestrator, aka the lead guitarist of Lorna Shore, Adam D'Amico, he explains how he works with the orchestration and the heavy guitars.
Would you say that you that part of it makes it easier or harder to write the songs as you
the orchestration?
The orchestra, whatever other element we'll call it additional elements.
So for me, like a lot of the like post-production stuff, like like all the orchestration, all the all that stuff, like it really is just reinforcement of guitar and drums. So it's not like they're doing counter things to it. It's just like these are already themes that exist like in it. It's just kind of it's working in tandem with it. So
okay.
Adam clearly understands that themes written on the guitar or any instrument can be reinforced through synths, orchestration, etc., and they do no more than complement each other. Funny enough, in Symphony X's album Underworld, in the overture, Michael Romeo does a similar chord progression in F minor, utilizing that same minor 6 chord. But anyways, before the heavy tempo changes come in, we hear a cool dark A5 to F5 passing tones. It's a really solid way to end the phrase. The rising of the strings before the blech is really neat, and you'll notice that a lot in this album. It's the equivalent of a drop in EDM. This little melody of F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, A, and then back to F is a really nice example of harmonic minor. but it more so implies that minor 6 chord. And at 1 minute and 50 seconds, we get a cool A sharp minor chord to C sharp minor. This would be a good example of a chromatic mediant chord progression. Using A sharp minor, the third of the chord is C sharp. We simply build the minor triad off of C sharp and we're good to go. Alright, getting into the tempo change, we're really getting into some dark composition. Using some simple chromaticism while the vocals mainly take the center stage. The F sharp harmonic minor dissonance, about 2 minutes and 34 seconds in, simply falls under the same ordeal of the minor 6 chord, and continues in F sharp minor with these aspects throughout the rest of the song. In the guitar solo, we do hear that A sharp minor chord, making the Roman numeral appear as this. Basically, in F sharp minor, we typically have our 3 chord being an A major chord, but instead, we're having an A sharp minor chord. So what we have to do with the Roman numeral is add a little sharp next to it to make sure you sharp the root, and then create a minor triad or just a lowercase Roman numeral. The next song on the record, Into the Earth, in my opinion, has even more interesting chords. The key of introduction is F minor, so 4 flats in the key signature. The chord progressions are following similar aspects of the previous song, but let's hear them more in depth and analyze them. At first, a simple 1-5, but in this section, we have F minor to A flat minor, which is a chromatic mediant. We have F minor to C sharp, which is that minor 6 chord progression. And then we have F minor to C. As you can see, we're simply playing around with chord borrowing, or borrowing chords from other keys. Most of the chord progressions I've found in this song have been of similar nature, and this is a good example of using minor chords constantly but still sounding really interesting. Gives the song a really dark and epic feel. Now the last part of the song we must talk about is the end. As I stated, we're in F minor, but we end up modulating to G minor. Now if you don't understand modulation, it's the concept of changing your home key, and they did it in a very smooth way of playing the same sort of melodies in the new key. Now F minor to G minor is reasonable considering the root is really close by and the key signature isn't too far away. Now the third track, one of the most popular songs on the record, is titled Sun Eater. This song is a little bit more easy to digest and it's not as dark and sinister sounding. We're simply using mostly diatonic chords in F minor, but while maintaining a really memorable melody. Now the main takeaway of this song is that Lorna Shore, they're masters of writing catchy melodies. As I stated earlier, Adam is a very big believer in reinforcing melodies with the orchestra or the synthesizer, and it really works well in the song. Let's quickly analyze the main melody. The main focus to pay attention to is not using the raised 7th, because often we hear the raised 7th in a minor key. Not raising the 7th is a more hopeful and superhero sounding melody. Listen to Captain America, the Winter Soldier soundtrack. On the contrary, when we do raise the 7th, it's more of a creepy and darker sound, like a Danny Elfman score. Now the next tune is one of my favorite drum parts simply because of the offbeat rhythm with the snare, and it drives the song really, really nicely. In general, it's common for the drummer of these deathcore bands to go immensely fast with both their hands and feet, and I think that this song almost has a lighter feel versus the previous ones on the drums. Anyways, Curse to Die is using B flat minor, so we have one extra flat from the previous song. So it's not too drastic of a key change from these songs, but it worked really well. It shares a lot of similarities with Sun Eater, but then again, is quite calm for the deathcore band. The chord progression near the end is very pretty and epic. It leads nicely into the next song, Soulless Existence. We're now entering C minor, using the 6th chord in its natural diatonic form. We're also hearing a 5 chord, as in G minor. In the previous song, I mentioned not using harmonic minor can drastically change the mood and overall tonality of the song, and in this case, we're using a minor 5 chord instead of a dominant chord. Almost gives it a calmness and sadness. Most consider the minor 5 chord in minor key to be rare, but when used correctly, it sounds really nice. Another thing to note about Lorna Shore is in the guitars. They don't always rely on their low-end strings and octaves, even though they have a really down-tuned 7-string guitar. This is effective in the sense that when we become more used to those higher frequencies, the breakdown hits with those lower notes and it hits us much harder because we haven't had a taste of those low notes yet. Similarly, they sometimes do this with the drums. By laying back for a short time and then getting faster and more complex, Lorna Shore avoids the blandness that most heavy bands have with constantly playing blast beats or double bass constantly. Now the 6th track on the record, titled Apotheosis, hits quite different. Being in D minor, the intro sounds like a modern day version of Mozart's Requiem, in the very beginning at least. When referring to the instrumental production, we should really note that this album is a huge step up for symphonic metal. Now back in like Nightwish or Epica days, where symphonic metal was kind of starting, the score was more old style and less cinematic, and this is a good example of a newer band setting new standards for the subgenre. Anyways, we're getting back into more minor 6 chords, as in B flat minor instead of B flat major, as it is diatonically. It seems in this riff we hear violins echoing some of the higher notes, which sounds very clean. The breakdown with the choir into the solo is honestly one of my favorite parts of the entire record. Something about a choir with heavy guitars and a melodic guitar solo outlining those chords were simply too perfect. Towards the end, we do get more into the diatonic and heroic sound, and then repeating the intro motif at the very end. Now the 7th track, titled Wrath, is a very black metal chord progression. F minor, F sharp minor into C major. Using that dominant chord is very smart in this case because sometimes with these black metal chord progressions and too much chord borrowing and chromaticism with your chords can honestly lose substance of where the home key is. The chorus and post-chorus allows a more diatonic feel with the exception of the flat 2. Now, going into the last 3 songs, there are a couple things we must mention before proceeding. Number 1, Lorna Shore has thus far uncovered many emotions of darkness, fear, and hopefulness, and this will continue throughout these last few songs. The upcoming songs, Pain Remains 1, 2, and 3 are linked together. I'm still going to address them as separate songs, but nonetheless they flow immensely well together. Now starting with Pain Remains 1, Dancing Like Flames, we begin with a synthesizer motif in C sharp minor. Bear in mind the motif almost sounds like we're in E major, as it's the relative major of C sharp minor. The theme is played on the guitar in slow drawn out variations, while the rhythm guitars are going heavily fast. Chord-wise, we're hearing mostly a 1-6-5 chord progression, and the song has a 1 major difference versus most of their other songs on this record. The song has no breakdown. But why? A common thing a lot of metal bands forget is not every song should have a breakdown. Some may need a bridge, maybe guitar solo, or neither. This is the producer's ear that most musicians must develop in order to be successful with their music. Meaning that just because you like breakdowns doesn't mean every song needs one. Your initial gut should tell you what the song needs, and getting rid of any unnecessary parts of a song is something most struggle to do. Now flowing right into Pain Remains 2, After All I've Done, I'll Disappear, we're hearing a simple motif of C sharp to A and C sharp to E. It has a very similar feel to Rush's 2112. The chord progression in general of these last couple songs to me sound very Parkway Drive-esque, but with heavier vocals and more melodic phrases. Notice how they modulate to E minor towards the end. They take a C sharp minor theme and move it swiftly to E minor. This key leads us into the final song, titled Pain Remains 3, in a Sea of Fire. The intro is an E harmonic minor theme with strings, building up with horns and timpani, and it grows stronger and stronger, and the chords expand slightly out of our diatonic harmonic minor chords. Working with E minor is notorious for being less heavy in today's standards, But in this case, they did it extremely well, and they did exactly what you'd expect. Heavy and melodic with memorable themes, really cool sounding chords like the minor sixth, which would be C minor. Now bear in mind, this song is 9 minutes and 12 seconds at its full run time, and it's filled with some of their most impressive melodies and harmonies. They use a piano to rephrase some of those melodies, and at 7:24, the stop is extremely satisfying. Hits us really hard with the final themes at the end of the song. The end of the song almost feels like the end of a book. It's just because they know how to end an album very properly, as if we were reading a book. Anyways, that's Lorna Shore, Pain Remains. What an incredible album to listen to and analyze front to back. I hope this really helped you guys with your composition, and it'll help you guys understand music and music theory a little bit better. And I appreciate you sticking around for as long as you did. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.